Senator from Iowa.
I ask that the calling of the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to make a few brief remarks regarding the introduction of the Security, Enforcement, and Compassion United in Reform efforts. And we have selected the acronym SECURE for this piece of legislation that we're introducing today. This bill promotes and protects the interest of the American people in a lawful immigration system and provides a fair and equitable solution on deferred action for childhood arrivals. And everybody in the Senate knows that by the acronym Daca. It's the product of several months of hard work between this senator and Senators Cornyn, Graham, Tillis, Lankford, Perdue, and Cotton. And I think before the day's out and the Senate closes down, you'll hear from almost all of those folks on their approach to this legislation and their support for it. Before I discuss what the bill does, I want to explain the process that we used to this point. On September 5, 2017, Attorney General Sessions announced that President Trump had decided to rescind former President Obama's unlawful executive amnesty program. Because almost 700,000 young people relied on President Obama's false promise, the Trump administration called upon Congress to do what the president doesn't have the legal authority to do, to find the only real type of long-term solution to this issue. And obviously we're here because that is a legislative solution and not something that the executive branch thinks up and tries to put in place. Starting in September, I've held multiple meetings with Senators Cornyn, Graham, Tillis, Lankford, Perdue, and Cotton to determine how best to fix Daca. Our aim was to find a solution that not only is fair for Daca recipients, but also promotes the interests of the American people. The immigration policies of the previous administration carried consequences that weren't always in our best interest. For example, President Obama allowed thousands of people to illegally cross our borders and to stay in our country, including dangerous gang members, sex offenders, and violent criminals. So, robust border security is crucial to bring integrity back to our nation's immigration enforcement. The enforcement policies of the previous administration enabled dangerous, unauthorized criminals, individuals like Kate Steinle's killer, to have free reign in our country, risking the safety of innocent Americans. The flagrant disregard of so-called sanctuary jurisdictions unfairly takes tax dollars from hard-working Americans only to ignore the rule of law and their own people's public safety. In crafting our bill, we also considered the inherent unfairness in our nation's immigration court and asylum adjudication system, and how hundreds of thousands of aliens wait in the backlogs for years at a time. That's wrong. It hurts the people who are stuck in their backlog, and it's unfair to ask the American people and legal immigrants to bear the burden of supporting these people while they wait. And finally, thanks to the leadership of Senators Graham, Perdue, and Cotton, we discussed in our small group of senators the need for a merit-based immigration system, one where we bring people to this country based on what they can contribute and not simply because they have some attenuated family relationship to a legal immigrant who's already here. So after having these discussions and after meeting with the President to get his input and his support, we've come up with a plan. This plan is fair to all parties, it's pro-American, and it's a solution to DACA. Our plan, as I said, by the acronym Secure Act of 2017, provides a solution to all of the issues we discussed. First, building off of the hard work and leadership of Senator Cornyn, we're putting days of porous, uncontrolled borders behind us. We're doing this by mandating the construction of tactical and technological infrastructure at the border. We're also beefing up our law enforcement and judicial resources, and we're putting more boots on the ground in the border states so that we can better apprehend and prosecute those who enter our country illegally. Our plan takes meaningful steps to end the lawlessness and tragedies at the hands of dangerous criminal aliens throughout our country. We do this by cracking down on sanctuary cities, ending the misguided catch and release policies of the previous administration, and finally, taking real steps to address intentional visa overstays. In recognition of the many Americans who've lost their lives to criminal aliens, we included Kate's Law, named after the person murdered by a criminal felon who came back into our country 5 times, Kate Steinle, so Kate's Law. This legislation enhances penalties for repeat legal border crossers and expands the inaccessibility and expedited removal of terrorists, gang members, aggravated felons, and drunk drivers. We also provide a fix to the disastrous Zavidas decision so that the government doesn't keep releasing dangerous criminals onto our streets just because their home countries' refusal to take responsibility. Our bill takes steps to eliminate many of the pull factors that encourage people to immigrate illegally. We do this by permanently authorizing the E-Verify program and providing immunity and other incentives to encourage small business to participate in that E-Verify program. We also take meaningful steps to reduce immigration court and asylum adjudication backlogs by hiring more judges and personnel, limiting the number of continuances an immigrant can receive, and imposing new safeguards to combat well-documented fraud and abuse. Again, thanks to the leadership and advocacy of Senators Graham, Perdue, and Cotton, our bill eliminates the phenomenon known as chain migration. From the day this bill becomes law, immigrants will only be able to bring their spouses and minor children into the country. This bipartisan, pro-American worker reform, which the President strongly supports, is an important first step towards creating the merit-based, economically productive immigration system that both Democrats and Republicans want. Finally, and most importantly, we provide a bipartisan solution to protect undocumented young people brought to the United States as children by adopting a bill, I'll give you the title, it goes by the acronym BRIDGE, B-R-I-D-G-E, bar removal of individuals who dream and grow our economy. Senator Durbin called the BRIDGE Act, quote, an opportunity for supporters and critics of Daca to come together and address a compelling humanitarian issue on a bipartisan basis, end of quote. We agree with Senator Durbin. The BRIDGE Act is supported by Senators Graham, Durbin, Gillibrand, Heller, Murkowski, Feinstein, Nelson, Flake, Schumer, and Harris. It would provide relief from deportation and work authorization to Daca recipients, allowing them to continue to fulfill their dreams, and they will continue to contribute to our economy. As you can see, Mr. President, our plan has fair, bipartisan, and serious provisions. By listening to colleagues and adopting solutions that both sides can agree on, we're providing a real solution to the immigration issues our country is facing. Our plan protects the Daca kids, it cracks down on criminal illegal aliens, and it provides real long-term reform to our nation's immigration system that benefit the American people. And it does so through the proper legislative process. In other words, a constitutional way, unlike a previous president tried to do this, providing greater certainty then for Americans and immigrants alike. Importantly, it is also supported by the President. That's all the more reason to pass this bill and fulfill our promises to the American people and the Daca recipients. Again, I want to thank the hard work of Senators Cornyn, Graham, Tillis, Lankford, Perdue, and Cotton, and their staffs, especially, in developing the solution. I'm looking forward to considering this measure in the new year and seeing President Trump sign it into law as he asks us to do. And I see two of my colleagues, Senator Lankford and Senator Tillis, are here, and I'm giving up the floor if you would like to speak. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Senator from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to thank Chairman Grassley for his leadership on this issue and his willingness to sit down and talk to a diverse group of people that think that we have a problem that we should solve and that we must solve. Senator Grassley just did such a good job of describing some of the technical aspects of the Secure Act and the Bridge Act and other legislation that actually came together to create the Secure Act. I want to back up and talk a little bit about what we're actually trying to do here. There are two key components to this bill and to efforts that have gone before the point that we've introduced this bill that I think are very important. The first one is the Daca Program. That's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The Daca Program was something that was implemented in 2012 by President Obama. What President Obama sought to do was to provide some certainty for young adults and children who were brought across the border, not through their own decisions, but through the decisions of their parents or a guardian, to cross the border illegally and then find themselves illegally present in the United States. Those, today, they're still protected because they're still protected under Daca, but the President announced on September the 5th that on March the 5th, that program would end. So now you can imagine that there are hundreds of thousands of young men and women that are uncertain about their future status in this country. It's a problem we need to solve. The other side of the equation is something that's also equally important to me and to a number of people in this body, and it has to do with our border security and interior enforcement. Back in early or late winter, I spent a week down on the southern border, and I went to the Rio Grande sector, the West Texas sector. I spoke with a lot of people at the land ports that hundreds of thousands of people cross every day, and we listened to their concerns about things that we need to do to better secure the border. Now, there are two debates in Congress right now, and I don't actually embrace either of the two extremes. There's the one extreme that says build a big, beautiful wall that's 2,000 miles long. It's impractical and not necessary. There's the other extreme that says we don't need borders, we need bridges. That's impractical and unsafe. What we need is a solution to border security so that we know who is in this country and that we have an orderly way to move between a country, someone who's in a country that wants to come and work or visit the United States and then return back in a legal fashion. The other thing that we've got to look at down in border security that I think is oftentimes overlooked is the humanitarian crisis with an unsecure border. One of the numbers that stuck with me, and there were so many that we covered when we were down with border security, but stuck with me, actually two numbers. One is the one that's most heartbreaking. Over a 20-year period, 10,000 people have died crossing the border unsuccessfully. 10,000 bodies have been recovered as a result of crossing the border and not finding their way to a safe place. About 1,000 of them were children. Unless we have the people, technology, and infrastructure on the border to know who's trying to cross, we can't protect them. Even if it means that we're going to take them into custody and potentially deport them, at least they'll be alive. Now, there's another statistic that was very important to me, too, and it was in a discussion that I had with border security agents down in Laredo, one of the big land ports where people cross every day. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details except to say that they confiscate about 400,000 doses of methamphetamine about every 48 hours in this one land port. That's what they confiscate. And by most estimates, it's only a minor percentage of all the illegal drugs that are crossing the border. So we obviously need more people, technology, and infrastructure to be able to capture people that are crossing the border through various trucks and cars. They're finding ways to hide these drugs that are poisoning our nation's youth and really people of all ages. So there's a reason for border security. There's a reason to invest in people, technology, and infrastructure. And there's a reason for us to have a productive discussion with how we can provide a compassionate, sustainable solution to the children or young adults who came to this country through not their decision, but the decisions of their adult guardians. That's what this bill, the Secure Act, is setting forth. We're trying to get a productive discussion going with Democrats and Republicans who will come together and recognize that a balanced bill that provides for border security, provides a sustainable solution for the Daca population, and get it done before March 5th. Now, there are some people that want to, I think, play a little bit of brinksmanship because they have very set in their mind how they want this bill to look. What worries me about a bill where you use timing, maybe a year-end budget agreement or some other device to get the bill done, that doesn't necessarily produce a bipartisan outcome that you can be sure is always going to be on the books. Those types of bills, those types of quick gotcha sorts of actions are oftentimes the bills that somebody will try and come back to and repeal or revise. We want a sustainable solution. We want a solution that's going to work and that's going to give certainty to this Daca population for the rest of their lives. And I think that the Bridge Act, the provisions of the Bridge Act that are now in the Succeed Act, do that. Now, I also think Senator Lankford and I filed another bill. We're full of acronyms here. I don't know, Senator Lankford, sometimes they say we're probably full of other things, but we're full of acronyms. And the Succeed Act is another bill that I think many of its provisions will be considered as we go through the negotiation process to get a bill to the President's desk. The bill that we've sponsored is called Succeed. It's a solution for undocumented children through careers, employment, education, and defending our nation. It's a lot like the Bridge Act in that we go to the Daca population and we know something about the Daca population that I think is oftentimes overlooked. It's a great group of people, a little bit less than 2 million. Many of them are working hard, going to school, serving in our military. They deserve an opportunity to provide a way to be able to recognize that's legally present in this country. And that's what I think we're going to accomplish with the Secure Act. What I hope that my Democrat colleagues will do, those who actually endorse the Bridge Act, and there are many of them, Senator Grassley ran through the list, I won't do it again, let's sit down and solve this problem. Let's accept that there are people at the far left that are going to stand on one issue at the expense of letting March 5th pass and have the Daca population at risk. Let's also tell the people at the far right who want nothing less than full deportation that that's not going to happen. Let's let the people in the center who want to come up with a sustainable, respectful, compassionate solution that's paired up with solid border security measures and interior enforcement provide a solution for this population. I think my colleagues that have worked together in the working group that Chairman Grassley has led are committed to working with Democrats to come up with a reasonable solution. I know that I am. I know my colleague Senator Langford are. And we hope that everybody will sit down and recognize that at the end of the day, this is for our nation's security and for the security and the certainty of the Daca population. If we set out about accomplishing those two goals, that I think will be very successful, and then we can start building on that dialogue for so many other things that we need to talk about when it comes to interior enforcement and immigration reform. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I'm honored to be here with several other members to talk about the issue of immigration. This has become this very contentious issue that as soon as you say the words immigration, there's a whole group of people that immediately start screaming amnesty on every part of the conversation. There's another whole group that starts screaming jackbooted thugs taking Latina grandmothers out of their homes. And the whole conversation diminishes and we lose the policy issues that are in place. There are obvious problems with immigration. We have not taken those obvious issues on in decades. They need to be resolved. And every year that they're not resolved, this issue gets harder and it gets more complicated. We should address the issue of immigration. Now, for years, the conversation's been out there, and for years, it remains unresolved. I would challenge this body in the next 3 months. Let's resolve some of the big issues in immigration. Almost 4 years ago now, I was in Central America with a group of other senators and House members. We're meeting with Central American leaders, and we were meeting with them to talk about immigration and some of those individuals leaving those countries, coming to the United States illegally, but also to be able to meet with them in Central America to determine what do they do for immigration. Multiple countries that are there in the conversation were talking about how they were increasing their border requirements at their borders, how they were managing their workforce within their country, how individuals from other Central American countries were traveling to their countries and changing the job structure and changing the pay structure. We somehow get this belief that the immigration issue is only an American issue. Every country in the world deals with immigration because every country in the world has the right and the responsibility to know who is in their country. Are they citizens? Are they non-citizens? I should have the ability in my country to be able to know who's coming in as a guest and to be able to say yes or no. That's a basic right. For some reason, that becomes lost in all of this conversation. When we fly anywhere else in the world, we have a visa or we have a passport because when we enter that country requires it because that country, when we land, wants to know who's in their country, where they are. Now, that seems normal to us when we talk about travel, but for some reason it gets lost in this issue of immigration. There should be a normal conversation, that our country would know who is in the country, that we would know where they are if they're a guest, and we would know when they're leaving. After the 9/11 Commission finished, they challenged our nation to resolve one of the issues of immigration that's sat out there that is still unresolved to this day. It's entry-exit visas. Why can we not know if a person comes in under a legal visa, we know when they come in, we don't know when they leave? That's still unresolved a decade and a half later. And year after year, when I've talked to Homeland Security, year after year, they've said, we're doing a pilot project, we're close. And year after year, that's unresolved. The vast majority of the people that are in our country illegally didn't cross the border illegally, they came with a visa. And then they overstayed it and they never left. And we're never asking the question, who's here, who's not here, and where do those connections come from? So what I'd like to find is a way that we can establish a group of foundational issues that are common sense solutions to the obvious immigration issues that we face and find common ground. We will have disagreement in this body, but we should be able to find common ground on immigration issues that we can all look at and go, okay, that's a reasonable way to do it. Probably every member of this body would do it a little bit different and would have a different set of preferences. But we should all agree it should be done. We've got to solve the obvious issues, and there are areas of common ground to be able to do it. Now, quite frankly, the President of the United States gave us quite a gift about 3.5 months ago when he said to the Daca program, that's an administrative program, it should be a legislative issue. I'm not going to renew that anymore on an administrative issue. That needs to be done in Congress. For the first time in a long time, Congress has a deadline to be able to deal with immigration. That's actually a very good gift, because this Congress has punted the immigration issue year after year after year after year without a deadline to get it resolved. Now we do. That deadline's in early March. I would suggest to this body, let's get it resolved. Let's find the areas where we can actually find common ground in this area. Some of them should be pretty obvious. Immigration courts right now have over 500,000 cases backlogged and pending. 500,000. Currently, if you're going to hire a new judge to be able to be in the immigration courts, it will take 742 days to hire one immigration judge. That's not right. That's ridiculous. We should be able to get that resolved, to be able to add new judges to our immigration courts and to be able to help deal with the backlog of over 500,000 people. The E-Verify system has been renewed in a bipartisan way year after year. Let's take it from being a temporary program, which it is right now, which some people don't even know it's a temporary program. Let's move it from a temporary program to a permanent program. Let's do a permanent reauthorization. And let's make the tweaks and changes that are needed, whether it's to be able to move the E-Verify into the hiring system, whether to be able to encourage individuals in their hiring for more companies to be able to use it, for it to be a faster system that's more reliable. At times, it can take up to 6 months to be able to get a final answer from E-Verify. Again, that's absurd. That's a fixable issue that we should be able to do. We should be able to resolve the issue of chain migration. We somehow believe that chain migration was an issue that's existed forever. It's not. That's been around only since 1965. Prior to 1965, our immigration issues were tighter than they are now. But now it has formed this system where you can add initially nuclear family, and then as you gain citizenship, you can add parents, you can eventually add siblings, you can add other individuals, and it continues to accelerate. I'm always frustrated when I hear people talk about our legal immigration system in the United States and say we should be more open. We admit 1 million people a year through legal immigration. 1 million a year. We're a very open country to legal immigration. We need to be more precise. We need to base our immigration not just on chain and family connections, but actually what our nation needs to grow economically. Now, I'm not anti-family, far from it. But we should have a reasonable system. Canada doesn't do it this way. Australia doesn't do it this way. The UK doesn't do it this way. We still do. We should be able to resolve this. We should be able to deal with the issues of border security. There's been a lot of conversation about a wall. I don't think we should have a 2,000-mile-long wall on our southern border and a multi-thousand-mile-long border on our northern border. But I do think we should be able to monitor our border, know who's coming in and out. Not everyone is coming just to work. There are individuals that are trafficking drugs and people. We do need to be able to monitor that. I've heard folks say we don't need a wall anywhere. I totally disagree. This whole adage of a 20-foot wall just begs for a 21-foot ladder. If you talk to the Homeland Security folks and the border security folks, they would say, fine, put a 21-foot ladder there because it slows you down in the process. A wall is not designed to prevent you entirely. It's designed to slow you so we can actually interdict you and to be able to prevent you from coming in. Yuma, Arizona can tell you the story about when they put up a wall, how it dramatically slowed down crime in Yuma, Arizona, rather than just having an open border. There are areas we desperately need a wall. There are other areas we just need vehicular barriers. There are other areas we need drones and we need greater technology. But we certainly need more personnel in that area. It's one of our other challenges we face. The president has said, let's add 5,000 new people. Great. You know how long it takes to hire one Border Patrol person? 450 days. 450 days to hire one person on the Border Patrol. It's a broken system of hiring. We need to be able to fix that. We need to be able to do more rapid screening. We certainly need to take care of the issue of sanctuary cities. All of the nation last week did a giant sigh for Kate Steinle's family as she was murdered in San Francisco in a sanctuary city from someone who had 7 felonies and had been deported 5 times. And then a jury said because the bullet ricocheted off the ground, it wasn't really murder. He can go free. We've got to resolve the issue of sanctuary cities. That's unjust. We're better than that as a nation. And we certainly should resolve the issue of DACA. We have kids that have been in this country that have grown up in this country, that they get up every day and they say the Pledge of Allegiance in this country. They speak perfect English. They have great grades and have had no criminal history. And when I ask people in my state, who would you like to come into this country to be able to join this country? If they say the pledge every day, if they speak perfect English, if they're passionate about entrepreneurship and starting companies and getting engaged, they join the military, that's exactly who the people of my state would like to see immigrate to this country and to be a part of it. Well, guess what? We've got almost 1 million of them already living here, but they have no legal status. They were brought here as a child by their parents under no decision of their own. We should have a long-term legislative solution. This particular bill that's under discussion now has a short-term solution to that, something called the Bridge Act. It's a 3-year legislative solution. It cries out for a longer solution, but it at least gives additional certainty, more so than what DACA has. I would challenge us as a body to be able to look at all of these reasonable issues and to be able to say, if we can't decide on these, let's start the conversation. What can we decide on? How far can we get? How much can we resolve in immigration? Let's do it, and let's do it right in the conversation. But let's finish it this time. We should negotiate with the House. They've got some great ideas. We shouldn't negotiate here. There's some tremendous ideas on both sides of the aisle. But let's certainly get it done. I look forward to that ongoing conversation. Let's get this resolved in the days ahead. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Assistant Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I know the senator from Arkansas has some remarks to make, so I'll keep mine brief. But I want to speak on the introduction of the Security Enforcement and Compassion United and Reform Efforts Act, or the Secure Act, which we will, under the provisions of Rule 14, put on the Senate calendar following the vote on the nomination at 4 o'clock. This bill is the product of a working group formed by Chairman Grassley of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the committee with jurisdiction over immigration matters. I've been a part of that, as have Senators Graham, Tillis, Langford, Perdue, and Cotton. And I would say for our friend from Illinois, we are all united in the desire to actually come up with a solution to this problem. Our working group had 2 assignments. First was to adopt reforms to secure America's borders and enforce our immigration laws. And the second was to find a compassionate solution for those individuals who received deferred action under the Daca Program created by President Obama in 2012. When I introduced a border security bill, the Building America's Trust Act, in August, I made clear that the main purpose for that was to create solutions that we could put in place to deal with our porous borders, and that throwing money at the problem is not the answer. But it was also contemplating that at some point in the not-too-distant future, we would need to combine border security and enforcement measures with a solution for the recipients of the deferred action under President Obama, which now President Trump has sent appropriately back to Congress for us to address. Coming from the state with the longest border with a foreign country, the state of Texas, I can tell you that my understanding and appreciation for border security is that it is multifaceted. It requires boots on the ground, it requires technology, and it requires improvements in aging infrastructure at our ports of entry. But it also requires new authorities and enhancements to existing immigration laws to close loopholes that have incentivized people to repeatedly violate our laws. We can all agree that we need to protect America's international borders, whether they be to the north or south. But each day we fail to put needed resources and laws in place for border security and interior enforcement. We strengthen the resolve of drug cartels, gangs, and transnational criminal organizations to further encroach on our sovereignty with impunity. If we're going to act to help folks who were brought here by their parents, which we all have compassion for, and thanks to President Obama's insistence for going around Congress in violation of the law, they now find themselves in limbo. Prioritizing the resources needed to secure the border is the first step. It's not the last step, it's the first step. And if we can demonstrate our ability to deal not only with a compassionate solution for the Daca recipients and combine that with real border security and interior enforcement, I would propose that we don't need to stop there, but we do need to regain the public's confidence that we're capable of dealing with these issues in a responsible way. The Daca program was designed to help those who were brought here illegally, but it was not created lawfully. President Trump, as I said, did the right thing when he kicked it back to Congress. So we've now introduced a bill that will address the very issues that our friends across the aisle say they care about the most, a solution for the Daca recipients. This bill provides a framework for a legislative proposal that we can support and that will regain America's trust. I've told both Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader, and my friend Senator Durbin, the senator from Illinois, that I stand ready to work with them on a proposal that includes the 5 pillars of the GOP framework: border security, interior enforcement, improvements to the E-Verify system, and some limits on chain migration. And I hope they'll come back to the table and respond to this proposal. I hope they'll also quit threatening to shut down the government, which won't solve the problem, but indeed will make it worse. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Arkansas.
I want to associate myself with much of what my Republican colleagues have said about the immigration bill we're working on, or perhaps I should say, to be more accurate, the immigration bill we should be working on, because the Democrats at this point simply will not take yes for an answer. We're offering a package that they should support, and in return, they're threatening to shut down the government. So let me just dispense off the top with their argument, such as it is, about the so-called Daca recipients. No one is eager to deport 690,000 illegal immigrants who are here mostly through no fault of their own. They were left in legal limbo by President Obama, and everyone wants to find a good, durable, long-term solution. But if we're going to give legal status to these illegal immigrants in their 20s and their 30s, we have to recognize there are going to be negative side effects. First, you're going to encourage parents from around the world who live in poverty and oppression and war to illegally immigrate to our country with small children. What could be more dangerous and even immoral than that? And second, you're going to create a whole new category of Americans who could get legal status for their extended family, to include the very parents who brought them here in violation of our laws. We often hear that children ought not pay for the crimes of their parents. That may be so, but surely parents can pay for the crimes of the parents. They are the one who created the situation in the first place. Now, I offered legislation with Senator Perdue earlier this year called the RAISE Act. It had many features in it to replace unskilled and low-skilled immigration with high-skilled immigration, to limit chain migration, to reform our refugee program, and to eliminate our diversity lottery. This Congress needs to take up our legislation and pass it. But today, I want to focus on chain migration in particular, because chain migration is one of the biggest categories of immigration that brings unskilled and low-skilled workers to this country to compete for jobs and drive down wages of working Americans. Did you know that once you have legal status in this country, once you're a green card and become a citizen, you can bring to this country not only your spouse and your unmarried minor children, but your adult children and their spouses and their children and your adult brother and your adult sister and your parents and their siblings, and it goes on and on and on. That's why it's called chain migration. Our legislation today would put a halt to chain migration. It was a kind of down payment on long-lasting legal immigration reform, in addition to things like strengthening E-Verify, improving security at our border, Kate's Law, named in honor of Kate Steinle, as you've heard Chairman Grassley outline earlier today. And we're also pairing those provisions with a bill that Democrats and Republicans should support, the Bridge Act. The idea of this bill is simple enough, that everyone who has a DACA card gets 3-year provisional status. That gives them the certainty without giving them permanent residency or citizenship, which I think sounds pretty reasonable. I know the Democrats agree with me too, because earlier this year, they were calling for passage of the DREAM Act. Excuse me, the Bridge Act. And the Bridge Act is supported by members of both parties, as Chairman Grassley outlined, including many prominent Democratic senators, both senators from California, the senior senator from Florida, the junior senator from New York, even the minority leader and the minority whip. In fact, the minority whip called the Bridge Act a bipartisan breakthrough. So if the Democrats were to oppose our legislation today, the Secure Act, the question would be why? Well, I think I know what they might say. They might say, oh, those terrible Republicans have added a bunch of terrible Republican ideas to this bill. But let me just ask, which of these provisions are so terrible? That we secure our border? Countries have borders, and those borders have to be secure. That we stop unscrupulous employers from hiring illegal immigration by strengthening E-Verify? When people say that E-Verify doesn't work, what they mean is E-Verify works. What they mean is they want employers to be able to hire illegal immigrants, to take jobs away from Americans and pay them sub-market wages. Or what about discouraging illegal and highly dangerous border crossings? And to get back to chain migration, do we really want a system in which green cards are given out by random chance? Because that is what we have, not just in the diversity lottery, but through chain migration. Today, you can get a green card in this country simply because someone in your extended family happened to immigrate to this country 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, irrespective of your ability to stand on your own 2 feet in our economy, to get a job and pay taxes and not take welfare, to assimilate into our culture. Shouldn't we have an immigration system that focuses on the needs of America's workers and the American economy, not one that gives out green cards by random chance, the way we have today? Shouldn't we be focused on the jobs and the wages of American citizens? After all, they are who elected us to come here to represent their interests. I don't think this is unreasonable, and frankly, I don't think the Democrats do either. They've supported the Bridge Act. They've supported reform of other immigration programs, temporary visas, because they worry about the impact of immigration on lower wage, blue-collar workers. And now the Republicans have stepped up and done exactly what the Democrats have said they wanted. We have offered a real long-term solution for persons who have received a DACA work permit. All we're asking for in exchange is common sense reforms that will prevent another situation like the one happening now in the future. So it's time for Democrats and Republicans to come together and support this bill. If you're serious about helping these DACA permit recipients, you should vote for this bill now. It's good for those DACA recipients, it's good for American workers, it's good for our communities, and it will be a good first step towards lasting, pro-American, pro-worker immigration reform. Mr. President, I yield the floor.